She was the first human the galaxy didn't believe in, mocked, doubted, and tossed into a job meant to break her. But when the deadliest alien predator on the station chose her over fear, everything changed. What began as a quiet bond would soon shake the very foundation of the Galactic Alliance. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and show a thumbs up by liking the video. You won't want to miss how this story unfolds. Now let's jump into the adventure. Callan Meyer stood quietly at the edge of the landing deck, her boots barely making a sound as she stepped off the transport shuttle. Her heart thudded in her chest, not from fear exactly, but from the pressure of being the first human ever accepted into the interspecies guardian corps. The bright lights of Research Station Luminine made her blink, and the air smelled sterile with a sharp metallic bite that reminded her she was far from Earth. She adjusted the strap of her gear bag, held her back straight, and walked forward. Aliens of all shapes and sizes turned to look at her as she entered the station. Some watched with interest, others with amusement. A few didn't bother hiding their smirks or muttered comments. "That's the human?" whispered a scaled being with too many eyes. "She looks soft." A nearby officer with bark-like skin snorted and added, "Probably won't last a week." Callan heard every word, but didn't flinch. She had prepared herself for this. Humans were new to the Alliance, and most other species saw them as slow to adapt, overly emotional, and physically unimpressive. That didn't bother her. She wasn't here to impress them. She was here to prove that humans could contribute. Something unique. At the end of the corridor, a towering figure waited for her. Commander Duran, a tall and rigid member of the stone-skinned Varnak species, stood with arms crossed and glowing orange eyes fixed on her. "Recruit Callan Meyer," he said, his voice echoing like distant thunder. "Reporting for duty," she answered, saluting with a steady hand. He looked her over slowly, then gestured for an officer beside him. "Escort Recruit Meyer to Section 17 Containment Wing." The younger officer, a lithe woman with silver-blue skin and mirrored eyes, stepped forward. "Follow me," she said simply. Callan had read about Section 17 in her briefing files. It was the area of the station that housed battle-class creatures, alien beasts, captured for military use. They were often too dangerous to be kept near the regular barracks. Being assigned there on her first day wasn't just unusual. It was a statement. The Alliance didn't expect much from her and had sent her to the one division where failure wouldn't cause political problems. As they walked, Callan noticed the stares. Some were curious, but others were openly amused or dismissive. A pair of tall, feathered twins nudged each other and laughed when she passed. "She has no claws, no armor. She'd make a better snack than soldier," one said. The silver-eyed officer, whose name tag read Lyran, glanced at Callan. "You'll need thick skin here," she said, "or maybe reinforced armor." Callan smiled faintly. "I've handled worse. I used to work with apex predators back home." They didn't laugh, but they did bite. Lyran's eyes flickered with mild surprise. "We'll see if that experience helps you here." They reached a large metal door sealed with warning signs in multiple alien scripts. With a quick scan, Lyran opened it. Inside, the air changed immediately. It was cooler, denser, and carried a wild scent of musk and something electric, like a storm waiting to strike. The corridor beyond was quieter, lined with reinforced glass enclosures and control panels. Strange sounds echoed: snarls, clicks, deep growls that seemed to rattle through the floor. Callan kept her steps slow, observant. She passed a six-legged beast with fur-like needles, pacing behind its barrier. Another chamber held something like a floating jellyfish with rows of serrated teeth. "This is where they send the creatures no one else wants to handle," Lyran said. "They call it the Prime Containment Wing, and your new assignment is in the last cell." Callan stopped in front of a darker chamber at the end of the hall. The lights inside flickered low, revealing only shadows and the faint outline of something. Massive, that, Liren said, is a Carnix howler. Captured on Ivanor 6, it's killed 3 handlers. We don't send anyone in without neural dampeners and backup teams. That includes you. Understood, Callan said, but her eyes were already drawn to the movement inside the chamber. Something shifted in the darkness. Then 6 dim yellow eyes opened and locked directly onto her. The creature moved forward slowly, its body made of long, lean muscle and blackened armor plates that shimmered like whetstone. It didn't growl. It didn't roar. It just watched her. Callan felt a chill run through her, but not from fear. There was something else there. Intelligence, curiosity. Don't get too close, Liren warned. It usually ignores new staff until they mess up, then it goes for the throat. I'm not like the others, Callan whispered, still holding the creature's gaze. The Carnix tilted its head, almost like it understood. You're not. Liren said flatly, you're a human. No one expects you to last more than a few weeks. Callan didn't respond. She just stood there, eyes steady, breath even, and the creature watched her silently from behind the glass. In that moment, something passed between them, something quiet, unseen, but powerful. She didn't know what it meant yet, but she could feel it. Later that night, alone in her small, quiet room, Callan lay awake, thinking about those yellow eyes and the calm stare of the creature behind the glass. They had sent her here to fail. But maybe, just maybe, they had given her the one chance no one else had dared to take. And Callan Meyer wasn't about to waste it. The days that followed were long, quiet, and filled with routine, but Callan Meyer didn't mind. Every morning, she rose before the station's cycle lights turned on, made her way to the containment wing, and reported to duty outside the Carnix Howler's chamber. The creature, still only known by its file code Unit 71X, remained unpredictable, dangerous, and utterly uninterested in the other handlers. But with Callan, it watched. Always watched. She started her work as instructed. Cleaning the observation decks, preparing meals, logging behavior notes. No one expected her to do more. In fact, most of the staff seemed surprised every time she returned for another shift, still intact, still unafraid. The other trainers whispered about her behind her back. Still hasn't quit, one muttered. Maybe the Howler's saving her for a special dinner, another joked. But Callan didn't care. She wasn't here to win a popularity contest. She was here for something different, something she hadn't fully explained, even to herself. Callan didn't use the standard neural triggers that the other handlers relied on. Those caused stress spikes in the Howler's vitals, which she quietly noted in her logs. Instead, she used calm body language, quiet voice tones, and repetition. She fed the Howler the same way each time, slowly, without sudden movements. She began adding small gestures, raising her hand before delivering food, pausing to see if the creature would notice. At first, it didn't react. But then one day, it did. When she raised her hand as usual, the Carnix tilted its head ever so slightly, eyes narrowing. Callan said nothing, just held the gesture a second longer before releasing the food tray. The next day, she did the same. Again, the creature responded. Not much, but enough. It was paying attention. It was learning. Liren, her supervising officer, started to notice the changes. It's calmer when you're here, she said one afternoon, watching from the observation deck. Usually we have to shock it just to make it step away from the barrier. Callan nodded. It's not about control, she said. It's about communication. Liren raised an eyebrow. You're trying to talk to it? I'm trying to listen, Callan replied. Despite the small progress, most of the staff still doubted her. Especially senior handler Vos, an older gruff trainer who believed in strict control. Your methods are naive, he told her during a training review. These aren't pets. They're weapons. You're going to get yourself killed. A few days later, Voss decided to make a point. During a training demo, he arranged for Callan to be pulled into a live demonstration in the arena. "We're showing basic control techniques," he said, smiling coldly. "Since you're so confident, you can help." Callan was led to the center of the reinforced training ring. Around her, officers watched from the upper levels, including Commander Duran himself. Without warning, a smaller but still dangerous predator, a Nirek Fang beast, was released into the arena. It snarled, its forefront limbs twitching in anticipation. It had been recently restrained, and its eyes were wide with panic. Callan barely had time to prepare. "Command it," Voss called down. "Let's see those human instincts at work." The Fang beast charged. Callan dropped low, avoided eye contact, and made herself appear smaller. The creature skidded to a halt, confused. This wasn't prey behavior. She held still, heart racing, waiting. The crowd watched in silence, unsure what would happen next. Then a deep roar echoed from behind the arena wall. A sound full of fury and warning. It was Unit 71X. From behind reinforced glass, the Karnix. Howler was watching the event unfold. Its eyes were wild, slamming against the barrier once, twice, making the deck shudder. It had never reacted this way before. Not to any trainer, not even under stress. But something about seeing Callan in danger triggered something different. Protective. Voss tried to brush it off after the Fang beast was removed. "It's a coincidence," he muttered. "Just instinct." But Lyran disagreed. "It recognized her," she said quietly. "That was more than instinct." Back in the containment wing, Callan stood again outside the Karnix's cell. The creature was calmer now, but still watching her with intensity. She stood there for a long time, hands at her sides, not speaking. Finally she said, "Thank you." From that moment on, everything changed. Callan began integrating more hand signals into her routines. A raised palm meant pause. A low sweep meant approach. The Karnix watched and began responding. It never fully obeyed, not like a trained pet, but it paid attention. It considered. Sometimes it did what she asked. Sometimes it didn't, but it never reacted aggressively. One night, long after the station's lights had dimmed, Callan returned alone to the containment wing. She input her clearance, stepped through security, and stopped at the Karnix's chamber. She didn't speak. She just stood there as the creature stepped out from the shadows. It was quiet, curious. She lowered the barrier field strength. Not off, but enough for a small space, a hand-sized opening. She reached out, slow and steady. The Karnix moved closer. No growl. No sudden movement. Just quiet, cautious. Then, to her amazement, it lowered its huge armored head until its snout touched her hand. The skin was cold and smooth, like polished stone. Callan didn't breathe. The moment felt unreal. The creature stayed still, allowing the contact. And in that moment, Callan knew. She hadn't tamed a beast. She had earned its trust. The alarm came without warning. Sharp, blaring tones filled every corner of Research Station Luma 9, followed by flashing red lights and a station-wide voice alert. Emergency. Hostile boarding party detected. All personnel report to assigned defense zones immediately. Callan Meyer had just finished her morning logs when the world around her changed. She dropped the datapad and sprinted out of the containment wing office toward the command hall. The floor shook beneath her feet. Somewhere deep in the station, an explosion had rocked one of the outer bulkheads. Security officers rushed through the corridors, weapons drawn. Voices barked orders in every language, and the intercom kept repeating the same terrifying word, Kraluk. Callan's heart dropped. She had read about them in training. The Kraluk were cybernetic raiders, merciless invaders known for disabling systems and taking prisoners. They didn't want to win battles. They wanted to break everything and take what remained. Her thoughts immediately turned to the containment wing. If the battle creatures were released without proper control, they could become as dangerous as the invaders themselves. By the time she made it back to the beast quarters, the area was in chaos. Handlers were running, trying to force neural harnesses onto panicking creatures. Some beasts fought back, roaring and thrashing against the pain-based devices. One handler was already down, a large bite mark on his arm, while others tried to drag him to safety. Shadow No, Unit 71X was awake and fully alert in his chamber. His 6 eyes moved rapidly, tracking every sound from beyond the glass. He wasn't attacking the barrier. He wasn't panicking. He was waiting. Senior Handler Vos spotted Callan as she entered. "You!" he shouted. "Get the Karniks ready for deployment. Sector 9 is under attack. Life support systems are there. We lose that, half the station dies." He shoved a neural harness into her hands. "Put this on him now." Callan stared at the harness. It pulsed with red lights, armed and ready to fire pain signals directly into the creature's brain. "He won't accept this," she said. "If I force it on him, he'll fight. You'll lose him." "You think this is a choice?" Voss yelled. "Follow orders or step aside." But she didn't move. She looked through the barrier. Shadow was standing perfectly still, watching her. Not the chaos, not the alarms. Callan stepped up to the control panel and lowered the containment field, not completely, just enough to slide the harness. "Inside." She set it down on the floor, never touching him. Then she made a simple gesture, one she had used before. "Stop. Stay." The Karniks looked at the harness, then back at her. Slowly, he stepped forward, not to the harness, but to the barrier. As the field shimmered, Callan lowered it fully. Across the room, Lyran arrived, her weapon drawn. "What are you doing?" she asked, eyes wide. "He'll kill you without control." "No," Callan said. "He won't. I've never used force on him." "I'm not about to start now." Lyran hesitated, then nodded once. "Do it your way. But if this goes wrong, I'll shoot him myself." Shadow stepped through the open barrier. For the first time, he was free, no containment, no harness, just choice. He didn't run, he didn't roar. He moved beside Callan and looked up at her, waiting. "We need to go to Sector 9, she said. "Follow me." The two moved through the station's lower corridors as emergency lights flickered around them. Smoke drifted through the air, and far ahead, the sound of gunfire echoed. They reached the sector just as 3 Kralok raiders turned the corner. They were grotesque, a mix of flesh and machinery, with glowing red optics and jagged cybernetic limbs. One raised a weapon. "Now!" Callan shouted, making a forward motion with her hand. Shadow leapt. His speed was terrifying, but his movement was controlled, clean, precise. He slammed into the lead raider, claws tearing through metal and armor. The other 2 fired wildly, but Shadow dodged, rolling across the corridor and springing up behind them. In seconds it was over. All 3 Kralok lay still, and Shadow returned to Callan's side. Officer Lyran caught up, breathing hard. "He listens to you. That wasn't random." Callan nodded, eyes locked on Shadow. "He's protecting us." As they advanced deeper into Sector 9, more Kralok appeared. This time, Shadow didn't wait for commands. He moved ahead of them, scanning hallways, taking cover when needed, returning to her side between attacks. He wasn't just following orders, he was thinking. When they reached the life support control room, they found it under siege. Captain Rellis, a stone-skinned officer, was pinned behind a console with 2 others. 5 Kralok had them surrounded. Callan studied the room and made a set of hand signals. Shadow understood immediately. He scaled the wall and disappeared into the ventilation shaft above. "Distract them," Callan told Lyran. "I'll give the signal when he's in place." Moments later, the Karniks crashed through the ceiling, landing directly in the middle of the enemy formation. The Kralek fell into chaos. Callan and Laren moved in, taking cover and picking off the remaining targets. When the dust settled, the room was safe, and Shadow was standing calmly beside her again, completely unharmed. Captain Rella stared in disbelief. That thing, how is it following you without control? He's not a thing, Callan said quietly. His name is Shadow, and he trusts me. Word of what they had done spread fast across the station. The human recruit and the unrestrained predator who cleared an entire sector. Together, Dot and the Kralek, they were retreating. But it wasn't over yet. Not even close. 2 days after the Kralek attack, the conference chamber of Research Station Luma 9 was filled with quiet tension. Officers stood along the curved walls, whispering in hushed tones. The room was built for official addresses, promotions, and ceremonies, but no one had ever expected to see what now stood at the center. Callan Meyer stood straight, dressed in a freshly issued uniform, with Shadow beside her. The Carnex Howler, the once feared predator of Section 17, stood calm and alert, no restraints, no control devices. Just stillness, trust, and the quiet power of something new. At first, the crew had pressed against the walls when the pair entered. There were gasps, even a few drawn weapons, but no one moved to stop them. After all, Callan and Shadow had saved lives. They had done what no one else could. Slowly, the room had quieted. Now all eyes were on Commander Duran as he stepped up to the platform. The Kralek attack could have crippled the station. The commander began. His voice, deep and steady, filled the chamber. We lost systems. We lost personnel. But we did not lose the station. And that survival is thanks to the courage of many, including those we did not expect. His gaze shifted to Callan and Shadow. The silence in the room deepened. During the attack, Duran continued, this recruit, Callan Meyer, led a Carnex into combat without a neural harness, without restraints, without fear. Together, they cleared Sector 9 and defended critical life support systems. They protected our people. And they did it with no weapons but trust. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Callan stood still, her expression calm, though her heart was pounding. She glanced at Shadow, whose yellow eyes moved slowly across the room, observing the crowd, but showing no sign of aggression. Captain Rella stepped forward next. His left arm, once cracked during the attack, now showed a repaired stone surface. I saw them fight, he said, voice quieter than usual. Not as a handler and a beast, but as partners. That creature followed complex signals. It protected Callan. It protected all of us. And it made decisions in real time. It understood the battlefield better than many trained officers. He turned to Callan. How did you do it? Callan cleared her throat. Her voice was steady, but not loud. On Earth, we learned a long time ago that forcing predators into obedience doesn't always work. Trust, patience, and consistency. That's how we connect. I didn't try to dominate Shadow. I showed him that I respected him, that I was worth trusting. There was a long pause, then Laren stepped forward. I've watched her methods since day one. I was skeptical at first. But the results speak for themselves. Shadow hasn't just been calmer, he's been smarter, more cooperative. No programming, no fear. Just clear, earned understanding. Commander Duran's scales shifted color, a rare sign of deep thought among the Varnak. Alliance training has always taught that war beasts must be controlled, that only fear or technology can keep them in line. This partnership challenges that belief. Callan nodded. Maybe it's time for that belief to evolve. The commander raised a hand. In recognition of your actions, recruit Callan Meyer, you are hereby promoted to specialist rank. Furthermore, you are authorized to lead a pilot program to explore non-invasive training methods for battle-class creatures. Your success with the Carnex is now part of our record. Applause broke out, not loud or overwhelming, but real, respectful, Some officers nodded. Others still looked unsure, but they were no longer laughing. They were watching. After the ceremony, several crew members approached Callan. Some asked about her training style. Others just looked at Shadow and shook their heads in amazement. One technician, a quiet being with soft blue fur, simply said, "Thank you. My cousin worked in Sector 9. Later, in her new quarters, larger, brighter, and fitted with a secure chamber for Shadow, Callan sat on the edge of her bed, tired but awake. Shadow lay curled on his platform, 6 eyes blinking slowly in the dim light. He had already explored the room and seemed to approve of the space. She watched him for a while before speaking. "They thought you were just a weapon," she said. Softly, "Something to point and shoot. But I always knew there was more to you." Shadow's head lifted slightly. He didn't move closer, but his gaze stayed on her, unblinking and focused. Callan smiled. "You know," she said, "I gave you a name long before they ever cared what you could do. Shadow. It suits you." The creature made a low, rumbling sound, not a growl, not a threat. Something more like a purr. Callan reached out and placed her hand gently on the thick, dark scales of his head. He leaned in just slightly, accepting the touch. Outside, the station still buzzed with repair crews, patrols, and constant updates. The danger hadn't passed completely. There would be more battles, more tests, more doubt. But something had shifted in the minds of the crew, in the hearts of those who had once doubted her. The human they had mocked now stood as the first to earn the trust of the galaxy's most feared predator, not with power, not with fear, but with understanding. And they weren't laughing anymore.